Hello, everyone. I'm Titus. I'm the VP of Go-to-Market at Civic, where we empower developers with privacy-preserving tools for user and identity management. This podcast dives into how digital identity is transforming industries at the intersection of Web 2 and Web 3. Now, before we begin, as always, please don't forget to like, subscribe, follow on your favorite platform. It makes a difference, helps us grow the podcast. Today, we're joined by Damodar Selvam, a digital identity solutions expert who recently featured us in his Forbes article examining blockchain's role in a secure identity verification. We decided we needed to learn more, so we invited him to discuss how privacy-first solutions are creating a more secure digital future while maintaining user sovereignty. As always, before we dive in, Damodar, please introduce yourself, tell us about your background, what got you interested in digital identity.
Yeah, thanks, Titus. Thanks for having me here today. My journey in digital identity began through my work in the IT sector, where I have developed a deep appreciation for how the technology influences the user security and experience. Over the past several years, I've focused on digital identity solution optimization at a global level, leading initiatives that integrate advanced authentication methods, elevate verification accuracy, and also ensure there are strict regulatory compliance anchored in standards like NIST 863, CCPA, PCI-DSS, and many more. My mission is to reimagine identity verification not just as a security control, but also as a trust framework enabling verifiable user consented access at scale while ensuring resilience against synthetic fraud and adversarial AI.
All very top of mind things today for a lot of us in the industry. So can you tell us a little bit more about like what is your understanding of user privacy concerns and how like throughout your journey that popped up in the identity space?
So what fraud mitigation has taught me that privacy must evolve like from a policy artifact to a system property. Today's user expect cryptographically enforced control over their data, enabling dynamic consent, contextual disclosures, and auditability. Whether I'm deploying zero trust perimeters or decentralized identity infrastructure, my design ethics centers on the digital dignity, minimizing the data footprints, embedding zero knowledge proofs, enabling selective disclosure to empower the sovereign identity.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the day when like there was no HTTPS and everything was like really easy to hijack. Now we moved on from that, moved on to HTTPS everywhere. And then, but then the blockchain space is almost like in a pre-HTTPS era with a lot of chains being fully transparent, which helps with auditability, but then doesn't help with user privacy from that perspective.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting kind of analogy on how the spaces are evolving. So I'm curious, like, what made you highlight Civic in your Forbes article amongst the companies advancing secure digital identity?
I spotlighted Civic because it has already operationalized the Web3 ethos through a robust blend of on-chain attestations, privacy preserving primitives like ZKPs. This isn't just a technical innovation, it's a shift from central hoarding to a verifiable trust anchored on immutable ledgers. This allows for a scalable, interoperable, regulatory aligned identity orchestration, making a blueprint for the decentralized assurance. So that's what kind of tricked my curiosity when I was doing my research, when I was doing the article. So that's why I wanted to feature Civic.
We appreciate that. It's been a long journey to get here. I think when we started out, this was like a concept and no one had deployed it at all at the first kind of iteration stage. It was 2015, 16, so about 10 years ago.
Right.
And then anchoring on-chain attestations became more or less kind of the norm nowadays in terms of like in the blockchain context of using identity. Because like programs and smart contracts, they need to know who they're dealing with in most cases, right? Because you want to make sure only good actors interact with your smart contract or with your on-chain application. And if you only secure your front end and your back end, what happens is if somebody finds your on-chain address and tries to interact with it through a command line or through the RPC directly, then your unprotected if you don't have on-chain enforcement measures as well to verify that identity. But yeah, I mean, that being said, I want to come back to the zero knowledge proofs part that you mentioned earlier. Like, what's your opinion? How is that changing the privacy equation in digital identity verification?
Zero knowledge proof enable what I call verifiable minimalism, uh, proving compliance and eligibility without revealing the underlying personal data. This paradigm is already used in age-gated services, KYC checks. Uh, it relies on cryptographic assertions like ZK snarks, bulletproofs, if I remember. So by shifting the data disclosure to assertion validation, we not only meet that compliance threshold, but we drastically even reduce the breach exposure.
Yep, 100%. I mean, ultimately, there's a source of truth for our identity data, and that's usually held by us or by the issuing party. That could be a government, or it could be like a state authority that issues a driver's license, for example. That data doesn't change. Like, you don't need to copy it every time as a kind of receiving party if you're a financial services company or a bank or like, I don't know, an apartment building landlord that wants to verify who is renting their apartment out. It's still the same information, and it needs to just prove some things, to your point, like, is this person eligible for this service or not, ultimately, like, if you generalize it enough.
Yeah, it's like verify once and reuse everywhere.
Yep, yeah, but unfortunately, there are still some legal hurdles in the space, like in various industries, where companies are required to hold that information. So I think we are moving in that direction, but there is, I think, some legal infrastructure that needs to catch up with the tech and with what we're doing in the edge of innovation here. Cool. I want to talk about a little bit about the on-chain identity verification advantages versus traditional centralized systems. Like, I think it connects with the ZKP question, but I want to expand a little bit more on that. Like, what do you see?
So what I can think of the advantages are like three advantages. So one is the ledger-backed immutability. Like once you kind of embed into the ledger, it's not that you can mute, alter it or anything. So that's one thing, the immutability aspect, and then the cryptographic attestations. And the third advantage that I can see is the cross-domain composability. You can kind of exchange the information across different chains. Overall, on-chain identity redefines the trust propagations. Credentials can be, like I mentioned earlier, credentials can be verified once, can be reused across DApps, platforms. This will start cutting the onboarding friction, eliminating the centralized honeypots, which we briefly touched upon earlier. So it's just not decentralization, it's a programmable trust, verifiable by design. So these are the advantages that I can see using on-chain identity verification.
Yeah, and I would go even a step further and say, like, well, there's all these ZKP algorithms and that require a lot of compute that try to kind of secure that proof, right? Whereas I think we already have that infrastructure in place on like the public blockchains, where you can rely on the chaining of the blocks themselves to be the securing component of it. If the proof is part of a specific transaction that attests something about that person, then it's secured by the chain it's on, as long as that chain is secure. And I think that's an interesting nuance that not a lot of people talk about, even in the crypto space. They prefer to go the route of like, oh, let's build this ZK overhead for whatever proofs they're building, whereas we have the best proven ZK algorithms here securing either the proof of stake or the proof of work chains in that way. So I mean, sure, it's not as private as like the fully encrypted ZK proof if you know what that pointer represents, but it's still a better trade-off than like recomputing everything from scratch.
All right.
The other thing I think that's interesting in the space is back when we started working on this problem, there was no decentralized identity standard. Now we have the DIDs, and there's hundreds of them right now of DIDs out there. And they also have a cryptographic component that enables you to like issue verifiable credentials and store verified claims in a digital identity standardized format. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how it evolves and how people use it in the context of OIDs for VCs. So the new OIDC standard that's coming along. Those are still relatively early. I think I was at the IIW a few weeks ago. That's a identity conference, identity standards conference here in California, and there's a few all over the world happening at various times. And there was an interesting demo around this verifiable claims for ID for VC by Microsoft and NIST through bank-to-bank information exchange with verifiable credentials, but it's still fairly early. So I think from that perspective, we still have a lot to grow on chain or off chain.
Right.
So moving kind of down the coming back to the article concepts that you talked about. So you mentioned decentralized identity frameworks. Can you tell us more, like, how do you think these can protect users against data breaches? Like, what does this mean for like the individual that interacts with them?
So decentralized frameworks, in essence, kind of invert the risk. So usually there is no centralized honeypot. The attack surfaces kind of become fragmented, spread across places, and it's kind of very unattractive to the malicious actors. If they have to attack, they have to go at each different places and start attacking. So with that in mind, you can pair it along with the biometric gating and the ZKPs. You kind of create a breach-resistant identity ecosystem. So that's where, kind of decentralized identity frameworks will help prevent against the data breaches.
Makes sense. Yeah, if you have the keys to the kingdom, then you can get tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of contacts in one go, whereas you have to hack every single person in a decentralized network to get access to those same level of like identity breach. And we've seen this happen like in the identity verification space. Every year there's one major breach.
Major, right?
Yeah.
Costing millions.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think coming back to the principles discussion, I think we're moving towards a world where knowing something about identity is not enough to prove that is the person that you're talking to behind the screen or behind the application that is interacting with that person. There needs to be some sort of proof of humanity involved in that particular scenario, but not just that, but a proof of like linking the person to the data, to the claims, which ultimately, like, the best proof that we have is like the video feed, which you may need to verify, like, put your hand across your face, for example, to see if there's no filter involved or whatnot.
Right.
It could be your fingerprints. It can be irises in some cases. Like, we've seen people collect that. There's all sorts of like voice fingerprint prints, and then there's also I think a typing cadence print that people have tried out. So there's ultimately we need a way to connect that. Like, this is the person that is trying to put this data to share this proven data. This data belongs to the same person, and this is a human being, not a machine. Because in the agentic AI age now, we're coming up against like non-human identities as well, not just human identities, and I think that's important.
Right.
But coming back to our story here, so how can businesses implement these privacy preserving verifications while still meeting that KYC AML requirement? We talked about this a little bit, being like the laws are not really in tune with the ZKP principles and the have only sharing what you need to know. So how should businesses approach this?
So traditionally, organizations would do a PII aggregation. So now businesses can move to embracing privacy-enhancing technologies to a verified claims issuance through selective disclosure enabled by the ZKP protocols, naming a few ZK stars, IDMX. Identities can prove compliance to like AML or KYC thresholds without even over-collecting the sensitive data. This model satisfies the GDPR data minimization principles and regulatory enforcements through cryptographic proofs. So a business can start leveraging this model, to the privacy verification.
Yeah, and I think that's an important piece around on-chain identity as well, like making sure it's GDPR compliant. That if you're putting stuff on chain, they always should be pointers and not the data itself. Because if you put like, I don't know, your social security number or your ID number or your birthday on chain, even if it's encrypted, technically that's not compliant with the right to be forgotten component of GDPR. So that's an aspect that people need to be aware of, because like if you have customers in the EU, this will be very, very relevant for what you're doing. So, okay, what are some of the challenges that you think are still in place to create that fully portable, user-controlled digital identity?
Three challenges that comes to my mind. First one would be the cross protocol interoperability, like between layer one, layer two chains. And the second one that I can think of is the W3C did spec into a globally ratified standard with consistent schemas and revocation logic. And the third thing that I can think about is abstracting the complexity through a UX, human-centric UX, where identity wallets enforce consent flows, identity proofs can be issued, revoked, or even verified in very few clicks, like 2, 3 clicks. These are the three things that I majorly is as a challenge, which I think can be resolved in the immediate future.
Yeah, and I feel like the DID piece is getting more and more traction. Like every year that I talk to identity experts, there's more people using the DIDs as standards. We're now seeing state actors in Europe, at least, trying out things with DID standards for their digital identity issuance. We've seen work here in the US with the Department of Homeland Security using W3C standards in their various programs involving like third-party developments on top of the DHS information, because their DHS is an issuer of credentials, right? And then
Right.
I think there's two schools of thought in the world, right? There's like right now there's a centrally controlled issuance and distribution, which is more of a European model where there's a state actor or the government that issues the credentials, and they also provide either the wallet. I think they're mandated by some EU directive now to be able to provide for their citizens at least like one option of storing that digital identity that's free for the citizens. So some states just decided to build their own wallets for that, their identity wallets for that, whereas others held funding campaigns to either build open source solutions or third-party solutions that are not going to be a cost to the end user. But then there's the US approach where this was fully decentralized. Like the DHS is expecting, for example, a third-party company to call home to ask, like, hey, is this person's credential real? Or issue cryptographic proof that that credential is real that doesn't require a dial home anymore through the W3C standards, which is like attached to the credential itself.
Right.
Which is I think where the world is going in that school of thought. But it's good because that's the biggest risk to privacy, is like the whole dial home concept. If my digital identity wallet knows that I'm using a certain service, then the government knows that I'm using that certain service. And in some cases, there might be legitimate reasons not to reveal that information. Right. So I think that's still a technical architecture barrier in adopting like these user-controlled digital identities, because ultimately, if you have a dial home mechanism, it's not fully user-controlled, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we mentioned this a little bit earlier. Data breaches are still a problem. Like people get alerted every day now with like their passwords being breached, but then there's also like more sensitive identity information that's being floated out there. Like, I don't know, for example, ID verification company gets hacked, and then your ID is now floating around, or your social security number is now floating around. How can blockchain-based solutions, like for example, Civic, prevent these vulnerabilities, in your opinion?
Yeah. So during my research, this is what I found. Like Civic's architecture exemplifies a breach resilient paradigm. Instead of storing the PII, it issues attestations, cryptographically hashed proofs anchored on chain. Even in the event of like endpoint compromise, there is no central data store to exfiltrate. This approach enforces non-correlation, data minimization, and auditability, aligning exactly with the GDPR Article 32 and NIST privacy framework objectives.
Yeah, so I think coming back to that earlier thing that we talked about, being decentralized as a network actually prevents that risk from the
Right.
get-go, as opposed to like going through hoops to secure your cybersecurity perimeter. It's better just design the system so you don't hold all that information in your own database.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's look a bit into the future. I think now with agentic AI, people are thinking about this, the non-human component of identity, more and more credentials for AI bots. How, in your opinion, how would that world look like where AI and zero knowledge proofs converge to create more intelligent, privacy-preserving identity systems?
Yeah, so you're right. So like we are entering an era of context-aware AI-mediated identity systems. Like imagine an embedded AI co-agent that can orchestrate identity proofing dynamically based on your behavior, based on what devices you use, or even contextual risk signals without even breaching the privacy. Additionally, by leveraging zero knowledge machine learnings, these systems will enable on device claim verification using the models that never expose the training data. It also brings real time privacy by default intelligence to the edge. So that's what I believe AI and zero knowledge technologies can converge to create more intelligent privacy systems.
Yeah, I hope that gets better because like I've been blocked on Facebook Marketplace for a while just because I'm a digital nomad. I've been traveling around. And I think I tripped on some AI that uses some sort of like signals on devices and understanding where I am and what I'm doing to like say, hey, this person that claims to be, I know I'm Facebook location on in Denver, for example, where I lived like last physically, and then he's in like Colombia now, or in Peru, or in Ecuador, or in Chile. I'm like, but I'm traveling. Like I'm not trying to be a bad actor here. So I think that's where the risk of like just allowing AI and knowledge proofs to govern everything mechanically can have these unexpected side effects of somebody who's not like in a pattern or a norm. So
All
we need
right.
to be aware of that. And then so I think that's my kind of personal use case. There's maybe a few tens of thousands of people out there that have this particular problem. So probably not a widespread issue. But I think let's zoom back out to industries like beyond finance, where I think KYC, AML requirements do require people to go and search for better solutions. What other industries do you see adopting on-chain identity verification first?
Uh, Sectors like healthcare, education are a prime candidates. I've seen education already being used where they kind of cryptographically store the transcripts and the skill badges, which can be kind of kept for lifelong, supporting the privacy and the global portability. Additionally, coming back to the health sector, where we can kind of anchor the immunization records, licensing data, and all the patient consent logs that that can be cryptographic proofs and HIPAA compliant. So these kind of use cases will help leverage the on-chain verifications.
Yeah, and I think like the pandemic was proof of how outdated some of the systems and methods are in that space. Like I had to carry around a card, like I
Physical
don't
card.
know, physical card, like it was like a paper card written with like pen on it. I'm like that could easily get damaged in like more, I don't know, in rain or in some other like non
I mean, even you
critical
don't
situation.
use it for a while, the kind of paper cards get
Yeah,
erased. You don't have any details on the
well, yeah,
document.
exactly. Is that the receipts as well? Sometimes they're printed on that like thermosensitive paper, and that fades away in time. It's like I
Right.
lose kind of the record of what I got in terms of the prescription. The other thing that really I encountered, kind of living and getting medical attention in various countries, is you can't really collect all of this information somewhere that's secure and then be able to have a full record of everything that like you've been through, like tests and results of those tests, because everyone kind of keeps their stuff in their own app. and it's very hard to get that information out of there unless you're very intentional about it. And I think that's a problem in the space for sure.
Right.
So beyond healthcare, education, any other sectors that are top of mind for you?
I mean, practically any sector, if they have a use case, can incorporate the on-chain attestations and verifications. It's not limited. I just gave a couple of examples, but we can even cut across real estate where their deeds can be stored on-chain so that you kind of have that visibility. And if there are multiple times that home was sold on the market, you know who was the first one, second, or so. There can be practically a number of use cases. So I just quoted a couple.
Yeah, I've seen also some pilots around car ownership and car registration also being
Yeah.
put in some of a ledger format, online digital identity. We've tested some use cases with proving your age while paying for age-restricted products like alcohol. There's more and more regulation coming to the adult industries now, where you need to prove that you're of a certain age to access certain websites. And that's not very straightforward to do. Like, I don't know how many people want to give their ID to some random website for that reason. There are some solutions being developed in that space, but not nearly enough yet. So definitely more industries should have this top of mind as they continue to iterate and build, because like ultimately it's up to us to push them in that direction, to require that kind of level of privacy. Because if we're okay with sharing the data to access certain service, then I mean they're gonna keep getting that data from us.
Right. Yeah. Basically, the industries needs to have the transformation mindset to move to the latest technologies that can help us on things. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the regulators themselves, which leads me to my next question: is like, what regulatory changes and developments would need to happen before this widespread adoption of privacy-preserving identity verification?
Yeah. What I can think of is we need a synchronized legal recognition of verifiable credentials and digital attestations across jurisdictions, like US, the NIST Digital Identity Guidelines, or Canada's Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, or Europe's GDPR. So kind of formalizing the interoperability, liability schemas, trusted issuers under these regimes will kind of catalyze the adoption and enable privacy-first compliance at a larger scale.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that varies by jurisdiction. To your point, there's all sorts of bodies that govern certain like countries or groups of countries, but there's no kind of unified global standard that says I can apply this method in this country and this method in this other country, and they'll be recognized in the same way. I think passports are the closest that get to that point, with the now electronic component of it, the chip stored data, and the MRZ challenge, the cryptographic challenge with the chip itself, and the the machine readable part. But beyond that, I don't think I have another example in my mind of any other cross-border or globally recognized standard.
I think there was a work done for COVID vaccine passport. I think it got dropped in the middle, but then that is one example that I can think was getting in that where we can use one identity across the geography.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other closest example that I have to the passport behavior is the driver's license, but that requires a secondary piece of information, which is the international driver's permit, which to this day I don't understand the point of, but people seem to be very adamant about it in certain countries. When you go and try to rent a car, for example, so they recognize my driver's license from, I don't know, Texas or Colorado or California in Romania or in Serbia or in Slovakia.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So, okay, the dilemma I think that comes to mind after all this conversation is like, how do we balance these ID verification needs with privacy demands from users and regulators? Like, how should builders and business owners approach this?
What I can think of is with selective disclosure protocols, and like I said earlier, contextual consent engines and the zero knowledge based attestations, where we validate without over collecting the data. This transition from like aggregating PII or any other identity-related information to a cryptographic affirmation marks a shift from surveillance compliance to the sovereign assurance.
Yep, makes sense. I think we all need to learn how to re-architect the way we manage identity for our users or customers, and make sure that we only collect what we need, and we only disclose what they actually need in that process
Absolutely.
to interact with them. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we get closer to wrap up, like let's look into the future. What are some of the emerging trends that you see shaping the future of digital identity?
So we are at an era where we are witnessing convergence of multiple frontier technologies in digital identity, like fusion of AI, ZKPs is giving rise to intelligent privacy-preserving agents that adapt authentication based on context without compromising user data. And then decentralized identifiers, like you had mentioned earlier, there are a lot of decentralized coming up. We can start embedding verifiable credentials, soulbound tokens. So all of these are redefining the ownership and the non-transferability in the Web3 era. Meanwhile, interoperability protocols like DITCOM, ION, or OpenID v4 VC, OpenID v4 VC are kind of forming the trust backbone for the cross-chain, cross-platform identity orchestration. So this shift marks the beginning of a programmable identity fabric, I have to say.
Yeah, and that becomes especially important in the context of um, essentially shared AI agent platforms where you spin up an agent for a period of time for a specific scope by this person behind it, and then the receiving party is able to identify like who is actually making that request, who is behind this agent. I had a conversation with a trading platform a few months ago about this. It's like they said to me like, hey, we don't mind having bots in our platform. They help kind of regulate the market and remove any arbitrage opportunities as long as we know who is behind those bots. As long as we're able to trace that to like a developer that we understand it's a human being that is approved to operate in our ecosystem. Because they can spin up 10 bots, a million bots, or 100 bots, doesn't matter. But we need to be able to tie those back down to that individual and the machine they're using or the credentials they're using.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, what advice would you give to somebody looking to optimize their identity systems as they're building their product, they're modernizing their org to enhance security while maintaining user trust? Where should they start?
I would say start by implementing a zero trust architecture. You can pick up on the NIST identity guidelines. Treat identity as a new perimeter and enforce continuous verification. And transition to a FIDO compliant passwordless authentication to eliminate credential based vulnerabilities. And I had touched upon earlier, augment it with behavior biometrics to dynamically assess the risk during the user interaction, how the user is interacting with the system. And additionally, you can integrate verifiable credential frameworks based on the W3 standards to decentralize the trust. And most importantly, what I can think of is embed privacy by design. Keep conducting the data protection impact assessments regularly. Try to minimize the PII collection as much as possible, and implement consent orchestration at every identity touchpoint. Wherever you are revealing the identity, ensure you get consent with minimal friction. So this layered approach kind of ensures the scalable, compliant, and user-respected identity systems.
Yeah, agree 100%. Always like, and try to be mindful of that consent itself. Because like, I think while it's important, you also don't want to get people into a consent fatigue mindset. Because that's also always been a point of contention when designing these systems. Like, how much trust do you allocate in a zero trust environment, so that the user experience remains seamless? And that becomes a question around time to live for authentication tokens. When do you request re-authentication? What kind of permissions do you give global versus per task? And these are great questions to ask your design teams and your product teams and your engineering teams to understand how you can build the best possible product with that friction between user experience and well, security ultimately, because that's what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we're approaching the end at this point. So big thank you for coming on. Big thank you for showcasing us in your article, Damodar. And you mentioned something before we went live, which is very cool. That you have your own Chat GPT bot that people can use to learn more about like digital identity and like the things that we talked about today. Go in more depth. Can you talk about it a little bit more so people know what they should expect from it? I'm gonna put it up on the
So
screen.
yeah, so this bot is more like a digital twin where you can have my expertise on demand. So it predominantly helps security architects, policymakers, and innovators optimize digital identity framework. So you kind of can ask all questions that is more around orchestration of digital identity systems, or even cybersecurity related questions. You would get an instant answer. Um, that's about the bot.
That's awesome. So yeah, if you heard a term today that you're interested in or a concept that you want to dive deeper on that Damodar shared, the GPT bot is a good place to do it. And then we'll also share Damodar's like links to follow him on social media, LinkedIn, and I know you said Damodar you have also a mentorship platform membership that
Yeah.
people can check out.
Yes. So like I do a one-to-one mentorship sessions on ADP list currently. So where I'm kind of connecting to people across the globe. And so yeah, and you can always connect to me on the LinkedIn. So I'm available on the LinkedIn. If you want to discuss about digital identity, AI, or cybersecurity, feel free to drop me a message and we can interact on LinkedIn. And yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me today, Titus. So let's build a more secure and privacy-first digital future together.
Absolutely, 100%. We'll post all these links in the show description once it's live on YouTube. And yeah, once again, thanks everybody for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on your favorite platform. Helps us grow. And check out civic.com and learn more about what we do. Over and out.